Welcome to the Falmouth Chamber of Commerce. The Falmouth Chamber is dedicated to working on behalf of our members to make Falmouth a better place to live, work, and conduct business. We are committed to developing the economic, cultural, educational, and civic interests of our community and welcome the support from all organizations to achieve our combined goals. Whether you call Falmouth home, are a summer resident, or a visitor, we hope you take advantage of all that the Chamber has to offer.
Hi, I'm Bob from Crane Appliance. Since 1983, as a family-owned company, our goal has been simple, to give our neighbors of the Cape and Islands a great shopping experience. Rest easy knowing our professional team will listen to your needs and help you pick out the perfect appliances. We'll take care of everything throughout the sale, delivery, and installation process. And we even have our own in-house service department. Crane Appliance, we call the Cape and Islands home.
Carlson Printing for all your printing needs. 508-548-7303 or toll free at 1-800-696-7303. Our email address is carlsonprinting@aol.com. Carlson Printing for all your printing needs.
Hosting services for fctv.org are provided by MegaNet Communications. MegaNet offers a wide array of internet services including Mega Backup Cloud Service, server co-location, T1, fiber, Metro Ethernet, as well as telephone services such as hosted PBX and digital voice. Their number one goal is to keep your communications network up and running and allow you to focus on growing your business. 877-634-2638 or MegaNet.
I'm going to call this meeting to order. And to start off, I'd like to have you all join me in the Pledge of Allegiance, if you would.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
So tonight, for recognition, I'd just like to mention a friend of mine is not a close friend, but she's a nice lady that just passed, Sophia Urban. Her dad, former select board member Ahmed Mustafa, and her husband Peter also works for the town here in Department of Public Works. And Sophia fought a long time with cancer and very bravely, and she'll certainly be missed by a lot of folks here in town. So I'm sorry for her passing. Does anybody else want to mention anything? So thank you. Next, I guess we're just going to get right into the budget. Oh, no, first we're going to talk about a license for authorize the town manager to execute the license extension with the Coast Guard for Knobsco Light.
Second.
And all those in favor?
Aye.
Thank you, Mr.
Thank you.
And now we'll get into, I'm sorry, what?
Maybe we should just explain it so people know what
Certainly,
it is.
go ahead.
Do you want to do it, Julian? Because you're...
I'm happy to have you comment,
Okay,
Sam. You've been heavily involved. Thank you.
Yeah,
Certainly.
we've had a 5-year lease with the Coast Guard, and it just came due at the end of 2021, December 31st. So they're renewing the lease, but they're also in the process of exploring turning that Knobsco Light property over to the town. It would have to be a competitive situation, but since the town is paid for restoring the light tower and the keeper's house, and is in the process of redoing all the landscaping to make it handicapped accessible, it's pretty much a shoe-in for the town. So this is a intermediate step. We need to get into the next 5-year lease, and then hopefully the town will one day own that whole property. It's an icon.
Thanks, Sam. And with that, we'll have the presentation of proposed fiscal year 2023 budget. And Mrs. Mullen, would you like to start?
Do you mind if I pull my mask down while
No,
I
that's
speak?
fine.
Is that okay? Well, good evening, everyone. It's good to be here. Looking at another budget year, which is exciting. And the budget was forwarded to you a week before the holiday, so I hope you all had a chance to take a look at it. I know Anjali did, and she actually found something in the estimated receipts, so I had to make some adjustments. Not a lot of adjustments, I'll explain to them, but I want to hand out, and you can pass along a new budget sheet for yourself. Sure. So what happened was when we plug in the estimated receipts, the library is usually estimated at 1,500, and I had 15,000 in there. So I reduced it, not a big deal. I already had 7,000 in the bottom line. And then I took the additional money out of the increase in assessments, because that always fluctuates, and we don't know what the state assessment's gonna be. So it left us really with a balanced budget of an extra $218, but, you know, thank you for seeing that. It was something I just didn't pick up on. Okay. So with that, I will start with the presentation. Okay. So the FY '22 revenues are strong. And let me just go over a little bit, because we've had a lot happen in the last couple of years. As we all know, COVID came into play. And for FY '21, we went into the budget for FY '21 with reducing our, we didn't fund our reserves. We used a little bit of free cash because we had to reduce our estimated revenues because we didn't know what was going to happen. And so, as you know, FY '21 was really strong with revenues. We had a one-time fluctuation of free cash of about $16.4 million. So FY '21 came in stronger than we ever anticipated. We didn't know what was going to happen. FY '22, we're 6 months in, our revenues are strong. They're stronger than anticipated, so that's good news. The new growth was certified at 1.6 million, so we've had an influx of building permits over the last couple of years. So over the last 4 years, it's been higher than normal. Last year, it was like 1.1. This year, 1.3, 1.6. There's a chart, actually, in the revenue portion of the budget.
Before you go too far.
Sure.
I made a mistake, and I skipped right past the public comment.
Oh, sure.
I see Miss Harlow Hawks was here too.
Okay.
And maybe somebody else might be, but I'm sorry, I didn't pay attention. And if you want to go ahead, we'll get right back to this after.
Anyway, I'm here tonight, and I'm glad to drive by. Can we take this off when we talk?
Yes.
Okay. I am glad to see, as I drive by the West Falmouth Fire Station, that there is work being done to get it operational again, and I thank you for that. Hopefully, it will be faster than the spare engine that has appeared. It is sadly apparent that after reading the housing article in the paper, seeing West Falmouth Fire Station closed, and the cost that the T-Ticket school roof will cost, that many town buildings are plagued by the lack of maintenance. And I'm not sure if it's due to being understaffed for years or we don't have the money to keep up with general maintenance. Tonight, maybe we'll know more. I hope and pray that our other outdated station that has passed its life expectancy doesn't fall to a maintenance failure like the West Falmouth Fire Station anytime soon. I live in a 150-year-old historic home that is still going strong because it's been maintained. I can only hope that the powers to be will start taking this perennial problem more serious so we don't have a dangerous public safety issue in the future and an extreme cost to the taxpayers. I know some things can't be anticipated, but others can be. Also, I do hope it's a rumor that one of the new hires at the fire department has already left, and why the firefighter union is the only one without a contract. Thank you.
Okay,
Merry
thank
Christmas,
you.
Happy New Year.
Pardon me, Mr.
Yes, sir.
Chairman, I think I should clarify because of what was just stated. West Falmouth Fire Station is not closed due to a lack of maintenance. There was a failure of the hot water heater in the basement, a catastrophic failure, which many of us who have had that occur know what that can do. It can spill a lot of water. It's unanticipated. And that's what caused the temporary closure and the need to make some repairs to the heating system, replace the water heater, et cetera. But the water heater failure was not due to a lack of maintenance.
Thank you. Sorry about that.
Oh, no, that's okay. So new growth was certified at 1.6 million. That's certified this year when we set the tax rate. So so that will roll over to next year, because anything new growth, when you certify it, it becomes part of your base of your tax levy, and so that's from year to year. So that helped us with balancing the FY23 budget. Also, what happened is it enabled us to increase our estimates for FY23 on new growth from 700,000 to 800,000. So we've had strong new growth in the last 4 years. 5 years ago, it was closer to 800,000. So, you want to be cautious and you want to be conservative in case something, you don't reach those benchmarks. Because right now we're estimating for next year, and you just never know what can happen. But due to COVID, there's been a lot of building permits, a lot of people are doing some building, so that has really helped us in that way as well. Right now, we've had level funded state aid for 22, and we're gonna level fund it again for 23, and I'll talk to you about that a little bit. And I mentioned the free cash increase for FY21. And so we have stabilization funds that we fund from our operating budget, reoccurring revenues for reoccurring expenses. So we're able to fund these every year. We have stopped funding the general stabilization fund because we have a fiscal policy that it's 5% of the operating budget, which we have reached that. And we do, they are invested for the long term, so you get a better investment return. You don't have to keep them liquid like a lot of our general fund revenues. Our capital stabilization is 5.3 million. I want to remind everyone that we will be having to buy equipment for the Sandwich Road Fire Station, so we will use the capital stabilization fund for that, and we won't have to borrow. We have 1.5 million in the debt stabilization fund, and what that does is it really stabilizes our levy with debt that is excluded from Proposition 2.5, and that has a lot to do with SOAR. Could be a whole meeting in and of itself. A lot of the large wastewater projects that we are embarking on. The SPED Stabilization Fund, which we set up with the school department a number of years ago, is at about a little over $1 million. And they have that as an available reserve in case we have an increase in special education. It's something it's hard to budget for, because at any given time you could have students that are going out of district and can really be taxing on your budget, increase your budget, and it's hard to plan for. And our other post-employment liability, we have about $2 million, a little over $2 million in our trust fund there. Revenues and expenses, and I say this all the time, and I know everybody gets sick of hearing it, but it's reoccurring revenue for reoccurring expenses. Right now, tonight, we're talking about the operating budget. Those are reoccurring expenses, so we're discussing reoccurring revenues. And that's what we vote in April, and that's what we bring to town meeting is our operating budget, what we're funding every year. And we have 4 revenue sources to fund our operating budget. We have property taxes, state aid, estimated local receipts, and other available funds. The other available funds is revenue that comes in that's put into a separate fund that we can use, that we do use every year to fund the operating budget. But it's constantly getting revenue in. And then there's the one-time revenue for one-time expenses, and that's really your free cash and your reserves, if you're going to spend from those.
Can I ask you a question?
Sure.
I was trying to figure out where we would find that short-term rental income.
I will be mentioning that.
What category would it be in?
It would be estimated local receipts.
Okay.
Okay, and I'm going to bring that up further on in the discussion. Revenue detail, we have a revenue policy that was voted. We have basic financial policies that the board voted in 2017 that we adhere to, and we also have the budget policy that the board votes every September that really helps us, guides us, if you will, from a policy standpoint of putting our operating budget together. And we have the 4 reoccurring sources that I just discussed that support that budget. Property taxes are your largest revenue source that do support your operating budget. That's the same in every community. Ours is about 76%. And our increases are limited due to Proposition 2.5. So we know every year that we can increase our tax levy by 2.5%. We know that that's a given. Everything else, we want to be conservative. Our estimated local receipts, state aid, and things of that nature. If we're not conservative in our revenue forecasting, you can run into problems setting your tax rate and having to go back to town meeting and cut your budget. I do want to mention that we're heavily regulated by the Department of Revenue. So when we go to set our tax rate, they're always, looking at our dotted i's and crossed t's and crossing our t's, and then also when our free cash is certified, they go over everything. So you really need to be conservative, because then when you're conservative and if you have extra revenue, it's easier to deal with that than if you don't have enough revenue. So our estimated local receipts, what makes up of those? You have your motor vehicle excise and your hotel, motel, and meals. And for we have in our policy, we have 75% of the meals tax allocated to the capital stabilization fund. We've been doing that for several years. We don't just have the 75% of the meals tax, there was a portion of the tax levy. When I came here 9 years ago, we had a capital committee that reviewed revenue sources and capital needs. And so there was a formula that we'd adhere to fund the capital stabilization fund every year. And so because it was compounding every year, we ended up capping it, which is in your financial policies. And that's why it's an odd number, a little over $1 million. But it is roughly, at that time, 75% of your meals tax and a portion of the tax levy. We recently voted at town meeting a community impact fee of 3% on short-term rentals that will be allocated to affordable housing. I do want to mention in that legislation that money doesn't automatically go to the Falmouth Affordable Housing Fund. It gets put into a separate fund that's called a Receipts Reserve for Appropriation. We would have to vote that out into the Falmouth Affordable Housing Fund. We've also, at town meeting, voted to increase the hotel, motel, and short-term rental taxes from 5% to 6% effective July 1st, 2022. And also the community impact fee is effective July 1st, 2022. And that there was a select board's vote before the meeting on town meeting that was allocating all short-term rental revenue allocation to go to the Falmouth Affordable Housing Fund. I just want to mention that with those votes, there's going to be some clarification that I'm going to need in order to incorporate that into your financial policies, your basic financial policies, because you want to go to town meeting every year like you do the capital stabilization fund for an allocation for affordable housing. However, it's not as clear cut as what was voted. What was voted at the select board's meeting was all the short-term rental allocation. And I just would like clarification, because when we first had the short-term rental allocation, when the legislature voted to tax short-term rentals, we didn't know how much money that was going to bring in, because we had no good idea what the short-term rentals were. And we did have a meeting, it was a joint meeting with the school committee, and we had other things on the agenda, and the short-term rental tax did come up. And we did mention that we would allocate about half of that to the school department once we had a good idea of how much money that was bringing in. Since then, COVID hit. We only have one good year of short-term rental tax receipts, one good fiscal year. It's about $1 million. So we're going to need some clarification on that, how to rewrite that policy. And also the vote from the select board was to take all the short-term rental and put it towards affordable housing, but there was not a vote to take that 1% from 5% to 6%. So, and there's some technical calculations, so I would ask at some point in the near future we put that on a separate agenda and we can actually work through those issues. Okay?
Well, to clarify, just from my understanding of what we were discussing was, and it's still actually in the manager's budget message, was the original proposition was that the possible 3% and then the additional 1% would go to affordable housing. But I felt it was important to make a motion at that meeting of November 15th to use all the revenue from the short-term rentals for the Affordable Housing Fund. Now, that would exclude the additional 1% and put it back to, with the hotel motel. What I thought the intent of our vote was to allocate whatever was from the short-term rental of houses toward that affordable housing. And I think that formula would make sense, because if this problem, or if this phenomenon increases, then our funding for affordable housing would increase. And it doesn't take away the revenue that we've been accustomed to having from the hotel motel rental. So that was my understanding of what we voted.
Okay, well, we would want, I would think, clarification with that, so I would know how to write the policy, particularly in the warrant booklet, that 1% town meeting is under the, I was under the impression that that 1% is going to affordable housing, and that's what was written in the warrant booklet. But if a vote was taken not to do the 1%, but to do short-term rentals, we
Right.
really need to clarify that for the community.
Well, I
Because
thought
if I find it confusing after reading the minutes and my conversations, then I think everybody would find it confusing, especially with how we're gonna allocate that and, the, how we look backward of how much money we're bringing in and how much we're gonna estimate. And the other issue is, how we want to write it into the policy and,
Yeah, I mean,
and just how we
even-
want to embark on that.
Even if it were clear, we still have to think about how we would incorporate it into the policy.
Exactly.
So it's just, we're gonna have that discussion regardless, so this will just also be clarifying exactly what you're pointing out. But-
Right, and also I'd like to have a discussion surrounding the schools, because we did tell the schools 2 years ago when we got this extra money and that we would allocate a good portion of that to them, because whenever we have revenue growth, we do try to share that with the schools, because their funding formula from the state, and Sam knows this, they have what's called not to get too much into the weeds, but we have a revenue growth factor within our estimated receipts, and so when we have certain revenue that increases, it does get in that funding formula allocated to the schools. So we do have to keep them in mind when we're looking at this as well. So
I
we
didn't
should
know
just
about
probably
that.
clarify that.
Didn't know about that offer.
Yeah, it was, well, you know what, it was a joint meeting, and it was brought up because, we're always looking for new revenue, and so I had said, well, when I know how much we're bringing in, we'll bring it back and we'll go to allocate it. But we've only had one full fiscal year, and then COVID came about. And so then I was just trying to make recommendations, or we were trying to make recommendations, so we wouldn't have to cut services, because we didn't know how COVID was going to affect our revenues. And so, you can see how that can happen along the way. And I think there were different members on the board at that time as well. So that's why it might garner a larger discussion on how we really want to move forward with it.
So could we move those two agenda items to another meeting and keep going with the budget?
Yeah.
I just think it's important to talk about that. I'm certainly concerned about the school piece and the 1%, but I think it would be a larger discussion than we can probably do tonight.
Oh, yeah, we're not going to vote it tonight. I just wanted to clarify that the intent of our vote at town meeting.
And thank you for that, because we wanted to start the discussion tonight.
Right.
And so, but yeah, we can put on another agenda item, and then we'll know exactly how to move forward. So that would be great. Thank you very much. All right. So. And then another portion of our estimated local receipts, departmental revenue makes up our local receipts, and within that is the water and sewer, beach, licenses and permits, building permits, ambulance revenue, special assessment, our betterments, particularly coming in from the SOAR project. That's a large portion of our assessment, and investment income, which has definitely gone down. Our local estimated receipts, since they've been so strong the last couple of years through the pandemic, we did increase our local estimates to balance the budget to about $1.3 million. We increased them. And our other available funds, these are funds that go into a separate revenue source, another fund that we transfer in, and you can see it on the page when we have our warrant booklets, when we have the yellow inserts, and then the back page, you can see all the available funds that are actually funding our budget. And we use parking meter, embarkation funds, wetlands, and waterways, and they are designated to certain expenditures. So energy receipts, that funds the wind turbine, our debt for the wind turbine, Wind One. Golf revenues fund the golf, the debt for the golf. Community preservation funds the debt. So it funds specific purposes. It's just put into a separate fund. Property taxes. 2.5% levy capacity, and what does that mean? And so we bill if you see the spreadsheet that I just sent out, there's so much, it's only a 2-page spreadsheet, but it has so much information on there, and you can see how I calculate the tax levy and how I take the 2.5%. What that means is I take the base levy and times 2.5%. I cannot bill the community more than that the next fiscal year. I am capped at that and highly regulated by the Department of Revenue. We've estimated new growth at $800,000. We've had, as I said, we've had a significant increase over the last 4 years, and we're maximizing our debt drop-off.
Yeah, Jennifer, you said, I can't bill the town more than
And we.
2.5%. We can.
I know, I'm sorry. I get into my,
I understand.
so that's all that it is.
I
And
just
it's-
wanna make
this
sure
isn't
that
me, it's we,
It's
so.
a shared responsibility.
It's definitely a shared responsibility. I'm not preparing the tax bill, so thank you for that, Sam.
Can I ask you, Jen, why are we
Sure.
estimating the new growth at 800 when we've been at 1.6 and 1.3 and like over 1 million?
Because I like to look at the last 5 years, not the last 2. The last 2 are from COVID, so when you think about it, when we estimate 800,000, I'm gonna be pretty confident for the next few years, we will be able to, have new growth as about 800,000. So once, it could possibly go down. We will not take in 1.6, and we might not take in 1.3. So 5 years ago, we took in just about 800,000, so I felt comfortable of estimating 100,000 increment, because what will happen is if I estimate $1 million, or if we estimate $1 million, or if we estimate 1.2 million, and it comes in at 900,000, we have to go back to town meeting and cut our budget, because it's a reoccurring, it's added to our base. So
Okay.
that's why we're so conservative.
So those other few years were less than 1 million?
Yes.
Okay.
And there's a chart in there. The last 4 there was a couple that might have been less. The last 2 were more. Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Remember, you're projecting revenues for next year.
Right.
So, I mean, who would have expected COVID? Who would have expected we would have had increased revenues during COVID? There's variability like this, and you don't want to be cut short in it. So I think, Jennifer's taking the right strategy.
Yep.
Thank you. And so this is just a pie chart that shows the sources of revenue, and it's a real visual of, you can see where our revenue comes from. And the majority of the revenue that funds the operating budget is property tax revenue. We have an appropriation policy, which is in the Select Board's budget policy of last September. Our increases are consistent with the Select Board's budget policy, and it's consistent with the 5-year strategic plan as well. And we fund our reserve accounts from the operating budget. So let's talk about budget increases. So we have proposed to level fund health insurance. We do have a little bit, we have a healthy balance in there, if you will. We don't know what the increases are going to be as yet, but we will be, if we do have a 2, 3, or 4% increase, we will be able to handle it in our health insurance budget. What the committee that manages our health insurance did this year, which they haven't done in previous years, is they gave us a premium holiday. And what does that mean? That means that there was actually a rate increase, but we didn't have to pay for the month of November. So they want to keep their, so we don't have, if they use their reserves to drive down the rate, we could have a real rate spike at some point. But by giving us a premium holiday, they keep the rates pure, if you will. So that's a little bit of a different tactic, which is fine. But even if they do have a rate increase, we will be able to handle it in the operating budget. It won't be large. The retirement assessment, which includes the override allocation, is about $500,000 at 5.21%. We do have, we will be fully funded by 2032. And so the rest of the allocation, every couple years, we do have an actuarial study that determines our assessment for retirement, and so I believe that they'll be doing that in calendar year 22. And right now, we're looking at a 6.3% increase every year to be fully funded. The school department budget went up 2.79%. We allocate 2.3% to them every year, but with the increase in new growth, we did allocate an additional $250,000 to their budget, and also the needs of doing school. The way the school does business is definitely changing because of COVID. They've had a lot of federal grant money. That's not going to stay around for a long time, but they do need to have policies and procedures in place to handle what has been going on with the school, which will increase their operating budget. So we did make an allocation. It's also includes keeping HVAC systems up and running to a certain extent, bringing in the outside airflow and things of that nature. So we did allocate more money to them. The Upper Cape Votech, there's a 10% increase. We do have several more students. I want to say it's about 10. I can't remember the
I
figure
think it
off
was
my head.
11 in the book.
Yeah, is it an 11 in the, all right, I was just off the top of my head. I did read it, but I forgot that number. So that might not be, that number might go down a little bit, the 337,000, but if it does, what we will do is we'll allocate that to the school department because it is for educational purposes, which we usually do if it comes in a different amount than what we've projected. But we won't know that number probably till the end of January, beginning of February. What also is in the budget is 3 full-time firefighters, 2 full-time police officers, 1 full-time health inspector. The solid waste contract, we're projecting at this point an increase of $750,000. We also have the ASME reclassification in the operating budget. We voted that in November. And then we actually allocated some money, but as you know, we have to put it in the operating budget for the next year. And we have adjusted wage schedules for DPW and seasonal employees.
I got a question for you. Where do we
Sure.
find that solid waste contract in here now? Because I thought I saw it come out of the DPW budget. It was zeroed out on that.
Yeah, so we did consolidate some line items. So we used to have a separate line item for the solid waste contract, street lighting and gasoline, and we put them in the highway budget. So if you look at this, if you go to highway in your booklet, so
I
if you
saw
have,
that, yeah.
you should have, at the end of it, you will see what the increases are, and you'll see those line items in the highway budget.
Mm-hmm.
So you'll see them zeroed out, but we did increase them in the highway budget.
So will the highway department be responsible for negotiating the contract then, or?
No, Peter McConaty, but we wanted to put it, instead of having it separate, I mean, it is under DPW.
Right.
So we did want to put it in, and that was at the department head's suggestion, we did want to put it under a full department instead of having it on its own. It was on its own before.
I see.
So we're trying to do some consolidation, and I think that would be good to put it under a department other than being its own.
Okay.
Separate entity.
Yeah. And then these are the expenses, broken down by component. And you get another visual, it tells you the biggest expenses, the largest.
You can just match the colors.
Yep, school department. So in conclusion, the estimated revenues and the new growth are stronger than originally projected. We have fixed cost increases that we have to fund every year, and those are some unknowns at some point, but we feel confident that the budget gives enough flexibility to handle any one-time change that might happen in a fixed cost increase, if you will. It allows for flexibility. And we continue to implement and further explore departmental reorganization and cost-saving measures. It's something that we are always looking for. And that's it.
Mr. Chairman, could I acknowledge, if I may, I want to acknowledge and thank department heads and key staff members for attending tonight and being available to select board members should you have any questions, and also an opportunity to thank all of them for their enormous work in terms of analysis and proposals and discussions going back as early as September of last year. So it's a lengthy process, and well done, and I thank all my colleagues here tonight for their great work, and certainly Finance Director Jennifer Mullen as well.
Hard to cut their budgets when they're sitting there staring at you, right?
Well, they've all made terrific requests, so
Yeah.
great teamwork.
Certainly true. I have one concern about the beach department, the salaries. The recommendations from the committee were, I thought, significantly higher than this, and I felt like they were sort of well targeted because of the shortages that we had last year. And I wonder if we could revisit that.
Well, I do know that we spent a significant amount of time in developing that, working with the Personnel Department and working with Finance Director Jennifer Mullen and our Acting Beach Superintendent Maggie as well. One of the items reflected in the discussions from the Beach Committee did not overlook the fact that we have several additional steps in our allocation for salaries for beaches beyond that was surveyed in other towns on the Cape. So there was a little bit of an apples and oranges situation. And we have a process in place that has addressed part of that. And there's also a significant increase, I think it's reflected in my budget message as well, for all our seasonal positions, fundamentally beaches, but also in public works as well. So I don't know if, Jennifer, if you have any other comments on that, they'd be welcome.
Yeah, sure. Historically, every year we do look at seasonal employees, and we adjust the wage schedule. We work with Denise Coleman, Julian, and Peter, and we've adjusted them significantly, really, in the last 2 or 3 years. I think 2-3 years ago, it went up $60,000, which is a significant amount of money, and then it went up again. So when we look at it, we look at affordability as well. And so we did adjust them. I think this adjustment's an increase of probably it's about $125,000. So one of the things that we look at is, flexibility when you hire somebody. And I know the beach is a little different, so I'll talk about seasonal employees in general. Have the flexibility of not hiring them at step 1, hiring them at step 3. If you are really looking to be competitive, we do the market analysis. The other factor that we look at is there's a couple positions I know that it's very difficult to hire for right now, and I know that one of them are lifeguards. So we would look at maybe a hiring bonus until see if the salaries go down, because trying to sustain a high hourly rate for seasonal employees puts all the other employees in jeopardy in looking at their wage scales. We really need to be conservative with that, but we want to be able to retain. So we do look at other communities as well, because if we just increase the wage scale by 20% for seasonal employees, what does that do to everybody else? And we can't sustain that, if we only can increase our tax levy by 2.5%, we can't sustain increases to that measure. So we look at creative ways to be able to deal with that. And I think with COVID, has been a real issue, and not just with seasonal employees, it's been with a lot of other positions too. So that's why with the seasonal, we were looking at some signing bonuses, but also being very competitive with the other communities as well. And this is something that we could afford.
I understand that, there's a dollar figure attached to it, but when you think about trying to hire people for under $15 an hour, I just don't think it's going to be practical. I saw a lot of those positions, and I just feel like we're going to be in another problem.
Well, do you mind if I respond?
Sure, please.
So I know we adjusted the wage scale to reflect minimum wage, right? So you have the step 1, grade 1, and then everything goes up from there. So not everybody is going to be hired at, under $15. And when you have 5 steps on a wage scale, nothing prevents you from hiring at step 3 or 4. You don't have to hire at step 1. But if you make step 1 a step 3 or 4, you've just... you just can't sustain that. Now all of a sudden, step 5's making $30 an hour for a seasonal employee, and then it's going to create more problems than you can really deal with. So that's why when we talk about flexibility, to try to, you can hire, you don't have to hire at step 1, you can hire. And so then when we adjusted to the $14.25 on that step 1, we adjusted everything else by the same percentage. But then again, we've actually put more money in the COLA article, so we can do signing bonuses.
So how do you decide that you're not going to hire at step 1, and why have step 1 then if you don't intend to use it?
Well, it wouldn't be used in all instances. You have to have a baseline. It's about flexibility and trying to be able to manage within the budget and being able to make those decisions to manage within the budget, and knowing that, okay, lifeguards, it's very, very difficult to hire, and this might not be true, but then there's another position that, that isn't difficult to hire, and we're able to adhere to the wage scale because it is very competitive, and we have a lot of applicants.
Right. But I think in terms of how much revenue we lose if we have unstaffed beaches, that's really significant.
I don't know that we lose any revenue, though. Obviously, I think we should have lifeguards because it's an important safety, but people are going to go to the beach with no lifeguard. That is just, people come here for a vacation and they're going to go to the beach, and if there's no lifeguard, that's, maybe that impacts their experience. And certainly, I think we have a long tradition of providing really excellent services at our beaches, both in the parking lots, at the places where we have concession stands, and with our lifeguard staff. but I don't think we lose money. I think you lose a service that's really important. You know, the lifeguards do swimming lessons. They obviously keep people safe. In the last few years, we've had some pretty heroic things that have happened at some of the beaches that have literally saved some people's lives. But I don't think it's I don't think we lose money if we don't have folks there.
Do we charge parking if we don't have parking attendants? I mean, how do we?
Well, no, but we would never be in a scenario, I mean, I think your parking attendant, the reason why you have some of that gradation is because your parking attendant, who's maybe it's their first job and they're 15, is not going to get, you want to have some flexibility. They may come in at minimum wage because they're a 15-year-old and the other jobs available. COVID has made it a little bit of a weird world, but in general, the only other jobs available are some busing jobs maybe. And so they might come in at that 15, and then your lifeguard, maybe it's their second year and you don't want to start them at a 2, maybe you start them at a 3 because you're having a hard time filling those. So I think that's why you have that, you know, that scale available for Maggie and for the town, you know, for personnel to be able to say, here's how we try to allocate it. If your parking attendant who's 15 is going to come in at $17 an hour and everything goes up from there, I think that that's where it becomes sort of, we just can't sustain that, you know, and it cuts so far into some of the revenue that we do generate.
But if we really actually had unstaffed beaches last year, right? Isn't that right?
We had a few particularly toward the end of the year. But we run into that difficulty each year because we have young people go back to college and leave early. So it's a phenomenon we have every year. But by and large, due to good efforts on Maggie's part and the late Bruce McGardo, we were able to keep beaches in good condition and by and large have them staffed. Parking attendants have not been as problematic to get those filled. So as Jennifer mentioned, one of the things that we're anticipating is a bonus system to encourage lifeguards to continue to work with the town of Falmouth and also to stay through the season as well. So that is, we believe, a preferred route to take rather than raise everybody's hourly wages accordingly because it affects so many other positions.
How much of an increase have we actually applied from last year to this year?
I think Jennifer mentioned about 100.
No, not the total, but I mean like
5.6, I think it's like 5.6%.
5.6, because
And our COLAs are 2%, so everybody, the unions are getting 2%, but we increased the seasonal wage scale by 5.6%.
Okay.
Plus adding sign-on bonuses.
Can I just ask, just in general with the sign-on bonus, is it going to be a stay-through bonus?
Yes,
Okay.
yes,
Correct.
I think that's what
absolutely.
you were saying.
That's
So you get
important.
it because you stay through.
One early and
Yes.
another later.
Gotcha, okay.
Yes,
It's,
the very
it's,
reasons you mentioned.
right,
Yeah.
it's both. So we wanted to provide an incentive to
something.
come sign on with us. You know, money in your pocket early, come sign on with us as opposed to go some other job. And another bonus to stay, and I think the date we went with is, I'm gonna get it wrong now. It's mid-August. Monday after road race in August. If I could just add one other thing, these are difficult judgment calls. You know, would we be better off in terms of recruitment if we could add more money to the beach salaries? Sure. But, you know, we've had trouble filling vacancies across the town organization. So if you apply that same logic of, you know, let's be bold and really aggressive and throw a lot more money at it, well, we won't be able to do that across the entire organization. We can't afford it. So not that lends to an easy, simple answer, but in terms of, you know, why did we come out where we came out and why did we not go with a larger increase? That's part of the perspective that we have to bring to it is we can't really look at beaches just in isolation of everything else.
But when I look at the beaches compared to, I haven't looked at every single one, but the majority of them, they seem to be the lowest of all wage rates. And I didn't see anybody else that was at, 14.5.
Well, it goes, I mean, there isn't one beach rate, right? So we have entry-level positions and then all the way up to the superintendent. I think we have beach staff that are in 6 or 7 different pay grades.
Right, but a lot of them are in that lowest, close to that lowest.
I mean, we have we have quite a hierarchy. You know, we have guards, staff guards, assistant head guards, supervisors. I mean, there are 9 levels.
on the seasonal scale. And it's not just beaches that are on the seasonal scale.
Maggie, you might want to come up,
Maggie, you
please.
should.
Yeah. Do you mind if I just jump in for one second?
Go ahead, while
Around
she's
the budget,
coming up.
because I did put the salary scale, the wage budget, I put that together. So I was involved in putting that wage, when you look at the salary and wages for the beach, I put that together. So let me just talk about that a little bit. It might answer some questions.
Okay.
When we budget for the beaches for wages, we budget for a sunny day for like 3 months. So you know that the beaches aren't going to be open every single day because it's sunny out for 3 months. You're going to have rainy days, you have rainy seasons, you might have a few rainy days, which gives the budget flexibility. We're not always spending that much. We have beach turnbacks probably to the tune, a couple years, were $50,000 that we didn't spend in wages. So then that lends to the fact of our wage scale, which is 5 steps. There's only one other, I believe, wage scale on the Cape that we've looked at that has that many steps, and that's Barnstable. The other towns don't have that many steps. So what does that do for Falmouth? Because we're larger, it gives us more flexibility to make those judgment calls and be able to staff the beaches and to be able to give a competitive wage as we look at the other towns. And so when you see the wages in the beach, where you've seen step 1 or step 2, that was something that was put together if people were if people were here before and they came back. So if they were at a step 2 last year, then they're coming back as a step 3. And that's why it was put together that way. But that doesn't stop us from being competitive and budgeting more than we need, because we're budgeting for a sunny day every year. And so that's where I say the flexibility comes in. It's not set in stone that if somebody comes in and they have to be put in a step 1, they can be put at a higher step. Now, I know that has created some other issues with the beach department, but that's the parameters that we work in.
Right. I'm just concerned about, it's important to compete with other towns, but we also have to compete with like restaurants and, local jobs, because we lost 3 of our good lifeguards last year to restaurants.
Right, and not to, I'm not going to, my recommendation, I'll say my recommendation, this is my recommendation to the town manager and the assistant town manager. My recommendation is you can't pay a lifeguard $30 an hour. It's going to create so many more problems with everybody else if you try to do that. I know we have an issue right now. I think we're competitive. It's something we can afford. If we start putting wages in that one small sector of people that are higher than the people that come in here every day, 52 weeks a year and work 40 hours a week, you're going to have huge union issues. We have to be competitive, but we're finding competitive, flexible ways that we can actually adhere to that. But that's just, my statement with the seasonal wage scale. We could talk about a philosophical difference, for a while.
But I would think that part of what, Doug is talking about goes to a job that Maggie and personnel work on, which is you are assessing who your candidates are. And that's an important job of a department head. You're looking at who the talent is and you're deciding, am I trying to bring them in as a step 2 or step 3 based on their experience and on the need that I have to fill that spot? And you're looking at your budget and thinking about how many spots you need to fill and how many you can kind of allocate at those different pay rates. And you're talking about how the fact that there's sometimes a turn back, that's a good thing in the sense that we know there is some wiggle room in the budget to maybe offer some more that are coming in at 2, right? Maybe you're paying some of your parking attendants, you're having a hard time getting them, so you're bringing them in at a level 2 pay, for their starting pay rather than a 1. I mean, those are the things that a department head is going to have to do.
Right.
And those are the calls they have to make. And I think that we are just going to see, I think in part, the problem, the struggle with the beaches is that there is just a shift in what young people do now, for work as well. I just think that you see it in a lot of other communities. This is a job that used to be really popular, and Bruce talked about it, over the years, that it wasn't the same, a lot of young people feel they have to do internships or jobs that they can put on resumes. There's been sort of a shift. And so for a lot of the population that used to go and do lifeguarding, they're doing something different. So they're maybe doing a part-time job at a restaurant because there's some flexibility there, and then they're doing an internship, or they're doing some other thing that they are, feel that they need to do. So I think it's gonna be a struggle. Even if we could throw all the money at it, I think it's gonna be a struggle, because I really do feel there's a shift in what young folks, college-age students, high school-age students are doing for work. We just don't see them in the workforce in the same way that we did when I was a lifeguard. I mean, that's what everybody,
Right.
that was like the prime job to do, right? And now it really isn't.
Right.
They're just not the way folks allocate their time.
Well, it's not an easy job, too. I mean, it's a lot of responsibility. You gotta do life safety training, and, you gotta be responsible and on time, and, it's not just a little thing. And I'm certainly not advocating for paying $30 an hour. I just don't want it to be the lowest paid job in town where we're not gonna get anybody, because the beaches are like the lifeblood of the town. It's, that's the centerpiece. As I mentioned at a recent beach committee meeting, I was at a Patriots game out in the parking lot before the game, and there's a guy there from up in the Boston area, and he says, "Oh, you're from the Cape?" I said, "Yeah." He says, "Well, we're gonna be buying a place down the Cape." I said, "You looking at Falmouth?" He goes, "Oh, no, hell no. Falmouth, they don't take care of their beaches. They don't care. I'm going to Dennis." And I said, "Geez, I didn't like hearing that." And if that's really the perception, that we just don't invest in our beaches. And I gotta say also, I noticed we only have $25,000 in here for beach nourishment, and I don't know what that's gonna really do.
Well, let me talk about that a little bit. We put that in every year, and it's never spent.
Yeah,
A lot of times it's turned back, but I keep it in there for beach nourishment, and sometimes it's been used a little bit, but what happens is the beach department can use it in conjunction with really MES, because they're dredging and sometimes they're moving sand over, so they can use that. But I just keep a little bit in the beach department so they know that they have it for beach nourishment. But they also, the bigger picture is working with Marine and Environmental Services and DPW, as well as moving the sand around and making sure the beaches get nourished. But I think it's important that the beach has that small amount. It helps them work with other departments, although it hasn't been spent every single year.
right. I'd love to see us have a new initiative to do some engineering of what a beach nourishment project could be. Like, for instance, Chappaquiddick Beach, I think, could really benefit from a survey of how much sand it would take to increase the area of beach. And I don't know what that number would be, but I know it would probably be more than 25,000. I would love to have us get started on something like that. I don't know who's gonna come along and take up the charge on this. I think it's gonna have to be us. And Chappaquiddick, I think, would be a perfect example where we could use trucked sand and nourish that beach. It's a very gradual slope. We could improve the beach, I think, pretty easily, but we need some kind of a study. And I would like to move that we increase the 25,000 to 50 and get some kind of an engineer working on that to see if that's a feasible, something that we can do, because we have beaches in our strategic plan as like a top priority, but I feel like we're not quite really making them a priority.
Doug, I'm not sure if you're aware of this, but we do have beach survey money. We've been appropriating that in the capital plan every year, and it's under conservation. Jen Lincoln is not here tonight, but we have appropriated that in the last couple of years. If you want an update on how that's going, I'm sure we could ask Jen Lincoln, but again, she's not here.
I have that also on my notes, that the conservation budget for, their budget was significantly reduced down to from 35 to 15 or something, do you know?
Well, they wanted, they have a part-time position, so it wasn't reduced. So they asked for a full-time position. They wanted to go from 19 to 40 hours, and so we put that in there just to let you know they asked for that. But the recommendation was not to fund that at this time, because we did give them a new position 2 years ago, a whole new full-time position. We understand that they're busy, but we have other departments in community development that we need to focus on if we were going to prioritize. And so that's why we didn't recommend that at this time, but we did not decrease their budget. Our focus on this budget really was public safety.
It was the request.
Right.
And I think I'd like to see the $25,000 that's already been earmarked be used before we'd even think about, A, raising it, and B, my second comment would be that if there is money for study, then we would take it from there. But if, I guess I'd be concerned about why that $25,000 hasn't been tapped to be used for beach nourishment, if it's been in there.
Well, because we haven't done any projects, I would think.
And we do, again, we have allocated money the last 2 years for beach profile surveys, so I know Conservation could definitely update that. We could mention that to the Conservation Department, that a question was asked from the Select Board, and where are we looking at that right now?
Is the profile survey the precursor to actually beach nourishment project then?
I think it's the beginning of it. So if that's where it's going to go, we would know, but it's definitely the beginning of that process.
Okay. Do we need to vote or anything to try to get something going on this beach survey, or how's that good?
If the board wants to prioritize that and us to take a proactive initiative on the 25,000, we're happy to do that.
Do you guys feel like that's something that we should be doing?
Well, I would prefer to make this an agenda item on a
Okay.
future meeting, because there's going to be some permitting blocks, steps that are going to have to go through in order to be able
Well,
to
that's what
do
we're
it.
talking about, is that,
Yeah, and so what I'd like to hear is a presentation on how we can actually go through that process and how we can fund it, all right?
okay,
And where we're at so far, like what, for Jen to come in and tell us what has been done so far, so that we could be more directive in whatever we vote,
okay.
right?
Maybe we'll have a joint meeting with the beach committee and the conservation and us, talk about how that could happen.
That would, I think that's the right approach to take.
Okay.
Just, let's define a path forward before we start throwing money at it.
Yeah, okay. Thank you. All right, any questions on any other items? Are you ready?
I have quite a few
You're
questions.
close?
Yeah, well, I wasn't sure if we're gonna go through this whole booklet or what.
Anything that's caught your eye that you want to talk about? I still have a few questions, but go ahead.
Okay, I'm wondering, under state revenue, school lunch is blank. Do we never receive money for school?
No, we do. They used to put it on what's called the cherry sheet. So we did have it as a receipt, but then we had it as an offset. But they don't do that anymore. They give the money directly to the school. It doesn't even come in that way anymore.
Okay.
So I should probably delete that line item.
Okay,
But we did at one point.
okay. On the Community Preservation Fund, the estimated budget and the FY '23 budget is a significant decrease.
Right. That's the debt. So the debt has decreased from
Okay.
last year to this year.
That's old land bank
Land bank,
that
right.
we paid off early
Got it. I
because
thought,
we were afraid that CPA might actually not be approved by the town. And so therefore, we wouldn't be able to continue to pay off that debt, and it would then fold over to the town to pay it off. So this was a way, we accelerated the payment of that debt. So that's,
Yeah, and let me just elaborate a little bit. So all the debt we have is called general fund debt. So we pay debt out of the general fund. And so you'll see that in on your budget sheets. And so we have other revenues that come into the general fund to help us pay off that debt. So the energy fund, we have the money for the wind turbine debt. We have debt for the golf course. We get that from golf revenue. That goes in. So that's why you see it transferred in, because all our debt is paid from the general fund. And so the community preservation revenues go into the general fund to pay off the community preservation debt.
okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
I got another question. Do we do, we've been having requests from the Recreation Committee to have handicap access over to the Trotting Park Fields now for quite some time. Is handicap access type things, is that something that's considered standard maintenance, or is that a capital project?
Well, that's within the Public Works Department, and Peter McConerty's here with us. I know that's an item that they've been reviewing for some time, and if it's appropriate, Peter could perhaps comment on that.
That'd be great, because
It is capital money. That's why you don't see it in this budget. So I'll start there if you want an update from Peter McConerty, but it is capital, and
if
we
you have
have
anything to
discussed
share.
it.
Yes, actually, that's in the process. We're looking to work on ADA spaces for the Trotting Park Fields this year. We're going to try to get it done through the springtime, working with our contractors. We had a meeting this morning. We checked the site this morning. We've been working on concept plans. It's something for Trotting Park Fields. It's something that we're going to be looking at doing in-house. And we're looking at doing is putting spaces down by the field. So the driveway that goes down there, we're gonna actually make that an access for 88 vehicles to be able to drive down there with 6 or 8 spaces down there. And they'll be able to either kind of like Sandwich Road fields with a concrete pad. They'll be able to sit in the concrete pad, or they can even watch it for the vehicle. So they'll actually be at field level. Instead of trying to make a switchback with ramps going back and forth, it just wouldn't be feasible. So it's better just to have a parking lot, put parking spaces right down at the field access.
Which the switchbacks aren't even, I mean, it's okay if you're in a motorized wheelchair, but if you have some other disability, that's not a good way. And if the weather's poor, it's not a great way to get down. So that's great to have it right down by the field.
And there's about an 8-foot grade drop between the parking lot, above parking lot and the field. So it'd be at least 3 switchbacks. So, and most times people wouldn't use them. They'd just go down the path. So we'd rather just put the parking spots right down at the field. So it's something we're going to be looking at in the spring to see if we can do it in-house. Parks Department does have enough funds, and some of the field work that we've done over there, we have some funds left over. So if we can do it in-house, we'll be able to save funds, and we have the equipment and the talent to be able to do it in-house.
So what do you do, come down and take a right and then clear a little area out of the wooded area there?
Correct. Where the gate is, the opening gate, that driveway might be 14 feet right now. We'll open it to 18 feet, and we'll bring it down on the bottom. We'll have 6 or 8 spaces, carve out the hill. We'll have to put in one of those concrete block walls. And then they'll be able to get in and back out. So we'll have to do some adjustments down there, but I think it will work.
And maybe you can improve the grade on the road a little bit too as you go along, or?
Basically the slope going down there, that the road is the road. We're going to follow the contour getting down there. Just the vehicles will be driving down that. It's just when you get down to that area, there's certain parameters that you got to follow with the percents. But if we can get them down there and get them into their spots, they can get out of their vehicles.
Are you going to pave that then, that slope?
It's paved right now. We'll be widening it and paving it, and then we'll be looking at paving the lower area. We'll look to pave it. We'll try to get the lower area paved for the summer. With COVID and everything else, we've found out this past summer and fall that our contractors are also having difficulties finding work, and contractors and truck drivers. So, but it's something we're going to do in-house, and we're going to try to keep it as much as we can in-house.
Yeah, every other week, somebody else is out of work for a few days, and
Right. So that's for that field right there, and I know the Recreation Department had they've been talking about that for a couple of years, so that'd be
that's good to hear. Thank you.
like a #1 item for the
And will we
ADA.
be talking about that again when we talk about the capital budget?
Oh, well, it's probably in their budget already.
They already
Right.
have the money now.
Okay,
We have funds right now to take care of what we're looking to do. If they want to do major upgrades, then we might be going back. But right now, what we're looking to do is for the ADA access and some additional fences down there to keep vehicles off the field. We'll be able to do it.
and I appreciate that update. I guess I'm just thinking that this is the operating budget,
Yeah,
correct?
right.
And I just wanted to me, I see them as two
Maybe on the
different.
Capitol, we can talk about maybe a restroom. Yes, your turn.
Well, while we have Peter, I have a couple questions on their section,
Okay.
if now's appropriate. About the solid waste and recycling job that Mary Ryther is currently in. It's at part-time, and I don't remember who came to the select board and said that they were interested in her becoming full-time. So I was wondering if that was a consideration.
I believe it was the chair of the Solid Waste Advisory Committee, that Alan Robinson, that came in and asked for that during his presentation recently.
Right.
We've been looking into that. Mary has been doing phenomenal stuff with public. She's been doing things that we have not been able to do. Right now, at part-time, the 19 hours a week is sufficient, but as time goes on, we can look to see if we can increase that. But right now, it seems to be working well.
Okay, great. This might be kind of a Jen question. On the salaries and wages, there is a line called differential that I have not seen on any of the other ones, and I was curious about that.
Does it say differential?
Yeah, and it's only for a handful of them.
Yeah, there's certain employees that get a differential if they work in the evenings, and it depends on the union contract.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
And then my last question, the Assistant Superintendent of Parks is currently vacant and unfunded, and I was wondering why.
Yeah, that's been unfunded for a number of years. We have always kept it in the budget. The Finance Committee likes to see it that way. It's something that started conversations, I think, in the last year. The Parks Department, since I've been here, really what their issue is really gaining seasonal employees and to be able to do more of the work, more of taking care of grounds. They also take care of grounds at the school department. So we always felt that the resources would go to workers to come in and actually do that work. We weren't ready for another administrative position. This was way before you came here, just so you know. I'm not, just to give you a little bit of history on the department. But, you know, because they've been doing a great job and with the fields and everything, we just started that discussion. Wasn't requested or asked for in this budget, but it's something we'll probably be looking to maybe put in the near future.
Okay,
Okay?
thank you.
You're welcome.
And can I just give a shout out to that in general,
Sure.
just as we have those, and Jeremiah's here and Peter's here, and obviously DPW, Parks, they do a great job, but the workload just keeps getting bigger. And so I know sort of all that proactive stuff that we really want to see happen. I mean, we saw Jeremiah here a whole bunch for trees that had to come down. That is probably an enormous like vacuum of time when you're talking about taking down, you know, a 200-year-old tree that's on Main Street. And so then all those other things that we know, we talk about like field maintenance and all of that. So however that structures, if it's another body on the ground doing the work, or if it's that plus somebody, maybe it's a part-time administrator, whatever it is, to help with sort of those proactive plans, that we keep that maintenance plan going, because I know that takes a lot of, you know, it's just, there's a lot of moving pieces to that, and whenever you have any kind of emergency, it throws that, for every department, but it throws all of that out of whack. And it does seem like we've made a lot of progress in the last few years, kind of just being better about our fields are in good condition. You know, a lot of the complaints that we kept hearing, you know, we haven't heard them as much. Now I've probably jinxed us, but so, you know, I hope that we just keep going in that direction, however that looks.
Yeah, one thing I do want to mention, this happened a few years ago, and just, I think sometimes it's good when we look to the future, kind of where we came from in the past, you know, in the past and what we have looked at. And I remember a few years ago, because there was an issue too of seasonal employees. And so when you bring on a seasonal employee, it starts and ends, you know, at a certain time. And with the Parks Department, we really needed employees for the shoulder season, but we didn't need it year-round. So what we did is we extended that, knowing that they might apply for unemployment, but still it was less expensive, and we were able to get those workers in for the shoulder season, even if we had done unemployment, instead of trying to get, you know, a bunch of people in year-round, which would have really, you know, cost more. And
Yeah, those, I think
so
that's
we do
just
look at
ways.
all these ways to try to, you know, get the job done, stay within Proposition 2.5, stay competitive, and things of that nature.
Another question for you, Jen. Under the finance section, the second department goal is establish a system-wide purchase order system.
Yes.
And I'm wondering, do you think that's a new software system?
No, it isn't. So Falmouth's a big community, a lot of different departments. And so we have the computer system in place for a purchase order system. Some departments use a purchase order system and some don't. So what we want to do is make it unified, and actually I have a draft policy on my desk to implement. So what we would have is all the departments use a purchase order system. In using the same policy and the same thresholds instead of using different ones. So it's really trying to make it unified, getting police, fire, and DPW on it. As you can imagine, it's a large task. There's a lot that goes, it's a $150 million budget, but we are looking at it continuously.
I have another question about trying to improve the help situation at the beaches. Do I understand correctly that the kids that do the lots, I don't know if it's the lot monitors that do the bathroom cleaning at Old Silver, can we get them out of that? Can we hire a cleaning company instead of having the kids have to do that? I wonder if that's a contributing factor to why we're losing people.
It might be appropriate if we could have Maggie comment on that.
Please.
She might have some insight into the pros and cons there.
Good evening, everyone.
Good evening.
So we have 3 bathhouses at 2 of our 10 public beach locations, 1 at Surf Drive and 2 at Old Silver. The Surf Drive bathhouse is maintained by 1 of 2 caretakers any given day. It's budgeted for up to 3 hours a day, and we have a Fairwinds employees that work in that role. Old Silver, because it has two sides, is larger use, earlier opening times on the weekends. The parking attendants who are stationed at Old Silver report additionally, usually about an hour, to do a bleach down. Not every parking attendant that works for the department is part of that cleaning. We do ask that question in interviews if people are comfortable using cleaning products. We know there are people who can't be around bleach, etc. But I know that, like, we station Goodwill, but we don't clean the Goodwill bathrooms. But we do maintain Surf Drive and Old Silver.
So they get paid for an extra hour. It's not like that's one of the duties on their regular hourly. They would come in, get an extra hour of pay.
Yes.
To do that.
If they're on the bleach down schedule, it's an extra like time on their shift. It also means you don't usually get to work at Old Silver unless you're willing to clean. So that's a choice that employees make.
Do you think it hurts us on recruitment? Or?
There are people who are interested when I ask that question in an interview, if they're comfortable cleaning a bathroom, because it's not explicitly in the parking attendant job description, because it doesn't happen at every location. But supervisors clean alongside them sometimes, and so we try and lead by example. I know that we can only do it once a day as employees because they have other work to do. They can't really go in and shut down the bathroom and clean it midday necessarily because they're running the parking lot.
And I've had some residents complain that, sometimes it's not as clean as they would like, and I'm wondering if it's also, if there's a level of service that we're not quite hitting there. Do you feel like I don't want to put you on the spot, but I mean, is
that's
it something
okay.
that you could use help with, or is it just, I don't want to create up ideas that it's not going to be helpful, but I'm just trying to think of ways that we can make this job more appealing and get it staffed.
I think that all options are interesting to explore. I don't think I've fielded that number of complaints about the bathroom quality. If someone has a concern about like a toilet paper that does get emptied during the day, we can go and clean it or refill it. We just don't shut down for the bleach down because it requires closing doors and opening windows and the like. But yeah, I don't know if that answers your question.
Okay. I guess I'm not 100% sure, then I want to push for it. It sounds like it's not really a big problem.
I think we, as the beach department, work with the facilities department and work with our staff to make sure we have what we need to keep the area clean. It's just we can't always anticipate usage or ability to do it more than the once a day that it's scheduled for.
And at the end of the day?
We clean it in the morning. The policy at end of day is that every toilet unit gets flushed, and then and the building gets locked for the night, and no one touches it until we clean it in the morning.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Sorry, go ahead.
No, I was going through my list. I have a question about assessing.
I'll try and then, since it is my department, and then if I can't answer, Tricia.
I have two questions. One is, the goal number one is to reach the goal that we need to inspect 2,400 parcels annually. And I'm wondering, is it realistic with the number of staff that is listed here to get that done, to meet that goal?
So I will answer that. We have added staff in the last couple of years, so we are at the cap of what we would add for the assessing department. So what they do is cyclical inspections every 10 years, and it depends, a lot of it is volume. So sometimes, and I don't think every community can absolutely reach that when they're supposed to reach it. It's probably at times an unattainable goal, but we do have a lot, sufficient staff in the assessing department to keep up with that. Plus, we do have a contract with, for our revaluation as well, so.
Okay. And what is it says implement a household personal property program. Could you give a brief idea of what that is?
Yeah, Tricia, you want to talk about that?
So we're mandated by the Department of Revenue to do a cyclical inspection on personal property along with the real estate. And it's scheduled in with our contract with our vendor. So they come July and August, and they have a list and a number that they have to hit. And we have no problem reaching that. And it's done annually.
So that's what the program? Oh, okay.
Yep.
It sounded just the way, I thought it was something that like personal property owners are gonna have to do.
No, they have to, so they have to respond to a questionnaire every 6 to 8 years that we send out, and actually we'll be doing that for '23. My budget actually increased for my mailing because of that. So we send out a form to all second homeowners, about 7,000, 8,000 people, and it's a form that they have to declare of all of their personal property that's in their dwelling. And we have to keep track of that. We have to hit the goal of 2% of those properties to fill out that form. And then we have to do a study and try and figure out how much that furniture is really worth. Is it grandma's furniture? Is it from Ethan Allen or what have you? And we have to report that to the state, and then they make a determination of what our percentage of tax should be on the dwelling.
Suddenly, everyone's gonna have IKEA. It'll be just, you know.
So you would not believe the stuff that we get on there, the people that actually attach a separate spreadsheet with like 500 items, and the other person that just has grandma's yard sale items that this much.
Well, that sounds like fun.
Yeah, it is. It's extremely time consuming.
Yeah.
Extremely. It takes one staff person to work on it for several months.
And do we get the money?
We get the increase in money if the Department of Revenue determines that the value that they're stating is really taxable value. The last time we did it, which was 5 years ago, we actually dropped down in value.
Unfunded mandate.
That's exactly what it is.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Who else has questions? Anybody?
Not, I'll keep going.
Go ahead.
Okay, in the election section, the part-time wages, is $70,000. So I'm wondering how many people work for elections part-time for $70,000?
Yeah, Michael Palmer isn't here tonight. A lot. But a lot, yeah, you have 9
Okay.
precincts, they're part-time, not even part-time, they come in and work the elections. And it does fluctuate because he budgets to how many elections we have every fiscal year, and sometimes we might have 2, sometimes we might have 4.
Okay. Under Marine and Environmental Services, there was a line item for dog food, and now it's 0.
Is Greg here?
Oh, that's okay.
I know that you have the Friends of Falmouth dogs, that they work, I know they work hand in hand with MES at times, so that might be it. He might have been taking out, and the other thing too is when you see line items, the line items that we have in the budget is part of the Uniform Municipal Accounting System, so we can't make up line items. So we might have zeroed that out and put it in supplies. But I'm sure
Okay.
the dogs are being fed.
Okay. I wasn't sure if that had anything to do with like the dog park or something. I don't
No,
know.
we have a memorandum of
It's
agreement.
like animal services.
Yeah.
Well,
The dog
there's
park.
actually a facility up near the wastewater treatment facility for stray dogs that are, picked up and put into kennels and what have you.
Yeah, they're not affiliated with the dog park.
No.
That's private,
There
nonprofit.
there are some volunteers that work there, but it's also staffed.
Okay. I highlighted something but didn't make a note, so I'll come back to that. Under the health department, I guess this is more of a board question. So we've approved bonuses for the fire department and for the police department. And I'm wondering if we should discuss something about the health department, because Scott has put in a lot of time coming every week, giving some sort of announcement about COVID updates, and he was coming to the board every other week for probably over a year. So I didn't know if that's something that we might want to discuss.
He gives a similar report for the school department, for the school committee, twice a month.
So maybe not necessarily a question, but something to think about.
And that wouldn't be something we would put in the operating budget. I think those bonuses that were given out were from ARPA funds, so it's not even part of the operating budget.
That's a good point.
Good question, though.
Okay.
Something to talk about.
And we did add a position in his department,
Yes, we did.
so I think that, in addition, is going to be helpful.
Yeah.
want a minute to look, and I'll ask a quick question?
Sure.
So I was wondering about the DPW the DPW renewable energy line item with reduced from 35,482 down to 15,000?
That's the, that one I can speak to. That's, Amy Lowell puts that in there. It's for the wind turbine. And what we did, we'll probably be able to zero that out next year.
Okay.
But we wanted to make sure we had a little money in there, for maintenance.
Right. I was thinking it was some sort of program.
No, it's the wind turbine.
Okay.
All right, I definitely had a question with the fire department, but I didn't make myself a complete note, so I'll just ask the chief later.
We'll have another chance next week. How do we, Jen, if we could go back, please, to that revenue on the local receipts, how do we find in the budget book what the short-term rental is? Is that actually broken down in here
No,
somewhere?
it isn't.
Oh, okay.
The short-term rental tax is not broken down. It's part of the hotel motel tax.
Okay.
In order to get a breakdown, I have to ask for it from the Department of Revenue. I have to put in a special request.
Okay.
I have those numbers, and we can talk about it when we have that as an agenda item. I can bring those numbers.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Anybody else have more questions?
Well, I have some questions, and they really have to do with our fiscal policy, which, in years past, I never even got to that point, but I thought there were some wording changes and possibly an additional goal that we could put into that fiscal policy, and it has to kind of go along with that whole idea of sustainability, which some of our citizens are basically pointing to and saying we probably should be looking at some more management focus on paying attention to that. And, we hear about beach renourishment and some of the other areas. I mean, I have a list of things where I think that, the affordable housing issue has been an ongoing issue for a long time. We've lost our coordinator, but we didn't even have a coordinator for a long time. We have the issue of sea level rise and increased storm severity and its impact on citizens' properties and infrastructure. We have the whole challenge of reducing nitrogen fertilization of our estuaries and our freshwater ponds, and the sewering efforts that are going on. We have the whole the question of disposing of our solid waste over long term. Eventually, these big garbage dumps that Bourne is managing and we're using it will fill up. And fortunately, that permit has been expanded, but it's there. We stopped using the incinerator up in Middleborough, which was an effective way to do it, but we chose not to do that because it was cheaper to just dump it in the landfill. But it's a long-term issue. And then we have the whole drinking water, wastewater, broadband infrastructure projects. And, there is a fundamental rule that I learned in taking my courses in management in my graduate program, which was fail to plan, plan to fail. And I just am worried that we're not putting enough time and management into planning for some of these large ongoing issues that don't necessarily fall under any particular department's budget, or at least the strategic planning for them, for the challenges and the risks that are mounting, aren't necessarily being addressed. And with that background, when I looked at our fiscal policy, which I know Julian is often citing and saying, well, look, you didn't change the fiscal policy, but so I'd like at least the board to consider looking at a couple changes. Certainly may not fit into the actual agenda item for tonight, but maybe in the future. But if you look in your budget book to the very end, there's a green section that says fiscal policy. It's under 12, very near the very end. And so there's a list of goals. And one of them that kind of caught my attention was D, which says minimize fiscal risk. My experience in private industry is that if you manage only to the bottom line, you're likely to eventually shrink because you're not looking at your strategic needs on how you can maintain a vital, ongoing, growing, if you will, organization that's actually innovating, if you will, and moving forward, and not just simply focused on the existing set of problems and, if you will, cost centers. And so I would like to see us change that from minimize financial risk to manage financial risk. It's not, it's not ignoring it, because it's obviously something you have to do. And then I think the last thing, under that same list of goals, I would like to put an F in there, which basically says, sustain and improve the town's environmental health, cultural health, and population diversity. Now, these are just my initial thoughts. But it seems to me it changes the focus a little bit of our fiscal policy to be more forward-thinking instead of just simply thinking of the day-to-day costs and running our day-to-day operations. So that would be just my suggestion for what we should consider to kind of change the focus of our fiscal policy, get ready away from that idea of just simply manage to, maintain our AAA or AA bond rating, but really thinking about what should we be investing in for the sake of the town. You've got private industry companies that stay in debt for years and years and yet come out to be a Microsoft or a Google because they invested wisely. And I think, just managing to manage the risk of our lenders is not necessarily the right focus. So I would just throw that out as my perspective, having worked in both the private industries and also in school departments, and then as selectman, on the school committee as well as on this. I just would like to see us shift this focus a little bit to really think more and more about the sustainability question that some of our citizens, I think, very effectively raised in terms of proposing the possibility of a sustainability director. That may not be the right way to do it. Maybe we can change the job descriptions of some of our staff to include these particular fiscal objectives.
Okay?
May I just
Please.
jump in for a minute? This would be a good discussion when we talk about adjusting the fiscal policy when we look at the short-term rentals, so I would suggest we could definitely talk about that, and then I'd have the wording and everything. But I also would like to suggest to have this, if this is strongly how the board feels, is to make this a main focus of the strategic planning session in June, and give direction, if that's what you're looking at, if you're looking for a director, to make that a top priority. And so when we go into the budget process, we'll know that that's a top priority above public safety and everything else. But really focus on that on our strategic planning session. Because I sat there and we had a good 6-hour planning session, and I feel the budget that we've put together really is in line with the planning session and the things that we've discussed. So I just would urge us to, if this is, to bring that up at the planning session.
Yeah, and I think it's accurate that this budget reflects that. I think what Sam is speaking to is we kind of keep talking around some of these issues, and that we really do need to embed them in the fiscal policy if we really do want you to then be guided by that, because, you're not going to go off on a tangent that isn't in that policy. And so if we're talking about, being sort of more forward-looking in certain ways, or it's not forward-looking, but just, sort of having a different focus, then I do think that we have to be really explicit about that. And I'd love to take a look at some other communities' fiscal policies in advance of, discussion like that, our strategic planning, not even before, but just to see some of the ways other communities might articulate some of those values. And it might be helpful to just have some different templates to kind of kick around and think about.
You bring up a good point. I just want to mention, when you do have that forward thinking and the long-term plan and about environmental, we can put wording in the fiscal policy, but the fiscal policy, we look at these things, but what drives them is the financials. What you want to drive them is your strategic planning. And I think it's more important that you put it in your strategic plan, that's your number one priority. That's what I want you to focus on the next year. And then the fiscal policies support that. That's really the way that it goes, because you can change the financial policies. I'll be honest with you, we only read these once a year. I know them because I wrote them. But the real driving factor of change and forward thinking is your strategic plan.
I totally agree, and I think using that strategic plan to really clearly define what our goals are as a board, and then continue to spend our time working on those goals, which from my perspective, we really struggle with that. We need to define them, we need to work on them, and then we give those goals, this is how I see it, to the town manager, and with the finance director, they then have to use the money and finance those top goals. But if we're not clear about them and really articulate those goals, we just, in some ways, keep doing the same thing.
And do you mind if I mention another suggestion is, because I've been sitting in on the strategic planning session for a number of years. And a few years ago, we used to have a consultant come in and actually manage the board's strategic planning session. And it was very effective because he kept everybody focused and was really able to draw out what the priorities are. And I make that suggestion maybe again in June when you meet, because I think maybe having somebody from the outside coming in, driving your strategic planning session and really looking at the goals might be very beneficial to this board. I believe that it was beneficial to the ones that I sat in before, it was decided not to have that. So I just, I make that as a suggestion.
That's a facilitator that we've
Yeah,
had.
it was I mean, I think it was helpful. I don't know if you have to have it every year. I think there's been I don't think we've had it in a while now.
I don't remember, who did that?
Yeah, we had it for.
Somebody from
Outside consultant.
Outside.
We had somebody from MMA come in.
Yeah, and it was helpful. It almost would be nice in some ways if, you alternate that sometimes, because sometimes it's nice to have that session where we really just dig into it and go through it, and then to have someone, when you're talking about trying to make some substantive changes like that, someone who can direct that. Because I agree, Jen, I think it was more, it was more directed, and so it was more productive in many ways.
I think this year's strategic planning session was a little bit sidetracked because we were trying to finalize the charter review, and we had COVID issues to deal with, and we were kind of realigning, so we weren't as focused as typically we would have been. Not
It's
to say
helpful to have outside eyes sometimes, because we are so used to what we're used to.
Right.
And an outside person can just give you a different perspective and can also keep you on track. I mean, you may not want to cut somebody off, but an outside facilitator who's being paid to get sort of to the end of the line can help direct those conversations in a way that I think can have a better result at the end of the day.
And really guide the process and draw out what this board sees as important for Falmouth moving forward.
And when I say that's fine, set those goals and priorities, but then there is a planning process. And if you don't have the staff, and we've heard complaints about lack of staffing to be able to do some of the initiatives that we actually discussed in our strategic planning meetings, if you don't have the staff, it's not going to happen. And I just want to make sure that we remember that there is planning that has to take place for us to address some of the strategic goals that we bring up in those discussions.
And that should be part of the strategic planning. If staffing is an issue that is a problem for the goals that we set, then that's when we talk about it.
Well, I have to say that traditionally, it's been the job of the town manager to tell us what staffing is required.
He's at those strategic planning meetings, and
Yes.
and that will be part of what he needs to bring to the meeting.
Okay.
I don't have an issue with that. I don't think it's an argument, Sam.
Okay, well, you say that, but when
I do
see.
say that.
Well, when I see that, we don't have a town, we're gonna lose our town council, assistant town council, we don't have a town planner, we don't have a building commissioner, we don't have an IT director, we don't have a housing coordinator, and we don't have a beach superintendent, except in an acting capacity. Who's doing those planning functions?
You make a good point. I get it.
That's it.
I also know that there are hiring processes in place right now as we speak, and people have been hired and backed out. That's not something we have control over. So I don't think it's for lack of trying to hire people. All of those positions, it's not a funding issue, it's a person issue.
And I just want to emphasize, searches are underway for every position you noted,
Good.
every single one, and have been and continue. Interviews are part of the process as well. That's our job, to continue moving in that direction, and we are aggressively.
But I don't think it hurts, and I don't want to get too far off because this is a budget, but we're talking about sort of strategic planning. I don't think it hurts at strategic planning or whatever form to talk about, what are some of the real, I have this on another board for school where we talk about enrollment, right? And the real demographic challenges, the geographical challenges, housing challenges, the financial challenges that we have as a town that no one in this room can really change. There are some things that we're not going to be able to change. But within that sort of world of things that we can control, to talk a little bit about, are there other ways we can strategize? What is it that we could do in this world that has definitely, it's been on a certain track, it's taken a radical, turn with COVID, with in terms of the people that are in the workforce, what people expect from a job. So many people expect to work from home. That's not the setting that we have. So I think we can have a really robust discussion about staffing as it pertains to, how are we doing it? Can we do it better? What are some of the challenges? Are there any resources we can bring to bear to help bring in, to attract more talent and get them to stay? But I agree with Nancy. I think, if people decide they want a job and then they back out, there's not too much we can do about that part of it.
And it's happened more than once during this cycle. And, no, I'm going to finish. And I agree, we need to have some sort of a package, like if housing's the issue and that's why they can't come here, or whatever the issue is, and we can look at that. But I think when you start throwing blame around, to me, that just feels non-productive. We can talk about staffing. We can ask the town manager what it is, what staffing he needs to make these things happen, because this is what we expect to see happen, and then he comes up with his plan. That's on us, because we're supposed to be driving this. It's on the Board of Selectmen.
I think you missed a point that I'm not seeing.
I'm sure you think I missed a point.
No. I said, I don't see where the planning is getting done. And I think it's critical that we start planning for some of these big issues that I outlined here. And I'm not seeing the plans where we can start to address them. And that's what I'm talking about. These are just unanswered questions at this point. How are we doing? How are we addressing some of these things? We have committees that are looking at it. We have some excellent data that talks about how critical the threat is or the changes that we're facing. I don't see the steps being laid out as to how we're actually going to address them.
So you're saying?
That's what I'm saying.
But that should be part of our strategic plan.
That's us.
Our strategic plan should say, we expect to have a plan that speaks to this, and this, and when we do our little time chart, by 2022 or whatever it is. And then that's a directive that the town manager then has to run with. But if we just sort of say, which I think we have done, and it has been where we've fallen down, we say, focus on climate change resiliency or coastal resiliency and climate change mitigation. Well, that's just a general, we don't have an action item, which is what you're talking about, the action item that we can then hold staff accountable for. We haven't given an action item in any of our strategic.
So let's go back to the question. Wait a minute, I want to go back, I want to address Sam. Let's go back to the question. Yeah, but I just want to finish my conversation with Sam.
I just want to give a different interpretation of what I'm hearing from Sam.
Okay, but I want to talk about
placing blame.
No, I want to talk about, Sam had a good point about the and now I can't come up with the name, the sustainability coordinator. If that's one of the board's priorities, then we need to say to the town manager, that is one of our priorities. It comes out of our strategic planning. You need to budget for that in the following year. I don't see the board doing that.
We haven't decided that yet.
I'm giving an example, Doug. I'm giving an example that if that's one of our priorities in our strategic planning, we should be able to go back to the town manager and give it to him, put it in process, which then makes sure that it gets funded. That comes from the board.
Sure.
If that's our priority, we need to drive it.
Okay.
But we come up with ideas, but we don't have anything concrete to say, we want to see this done.
What I'm hearing from Sam is on us, when we're having these gaps in staffing for planning, we need to step it up a little more with the planning, is what I'm hearing, not placing blame as much. I'm thinking he's saying we need to pay attention to these items, make sure that we're on the ball. I think that's what I'm hearing.
That's not what I heard when he was talking about people not being hired.
Well, we don't have that.
I just said,
We are
to
trying to hire.
do the planning, we're way in the hole.
Right, I agree.
And I'm not sure that a sustainability director is going to be able to address all of these strategic challenges that we have.
I'm not saying that
And
you
so I'm
will.
not saying that is the answer.
Right.
I do think we have to start that planning process so that we have some tangible plans as best we can focus for the future to figure out how we're gonna address things like, wastewater treatment.
I agree.
Okay, and we have committees that are providing us with information, but what are we gonna do about it? And I'm not seeing those plans, and that makes me uncomfortable.
So we're gonna have to step it up.
We are, as a board, we are going to have, I think we all agree with that.
Right.
But I also think that, and those positions that you mentioned are critical, and they have to be filled. And what I'm saying is, it's a process that we need, I guess, to look at, but it's not something that we can always control either. Because I have been in conversations with, where is this certain position? Where is this certain position? And I get answers to those questions.
Can I say that when you're filling these positions, though, you better have somebody with the background that can do that planning. And so that's another piece of this, is that you just can't hire anybody off the street to fill that position. You've got to have somebody that has the experience and the vision, or at least the resources, to be able to say, this is how we can start moving forward on developing these plans, coming up with the estimates of how much it's going to cost in the future, be it part of your capital budget or your operating budget. And I don't see enough of that being done, and I'm raising that question.
All right, well, we're getting way outside the budget. These folks have been here a long time. So.
Well, I don't know about that.
Any more budget questions? Yes.
Just one more thing.
Okay.
I noticed a lot of the departments had performance evaluations of what they accomplished from the year before, and I just wanted to say I really liked reading those.
Very
And
nice.
helpful.
Thank
They
you.
did a great job.
Indeed.
Thank you all for being here. Anybody want to ask for a budget increase while you're here? Ah, there you go.
You
All
get
right.
nothing, chief.
Thank you all. I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
I move we adjourn.
Mr. Chairman, can I just clarify one
All
item?
the things.
Just a reminder to the board that at your next meeting, which will be a week from tonight, we'll be bringing the budget to the board to finalize, approve, and transmit to the Finance Committee, consistent with the very narrow timelines that are in the town charter.
Right.
So there has to be the Finance Committee, as you know, by the 15th of January, which means a
tight.
week from tonight is your last opportunity on a regular meeting night to do that. Right. So that's traditionally how we do it.
And we're planning to meet the 15th?
Yes,
The 10th,
Okay.
a week from tonight.
Then we have the
but also the 15th for our, like.
Oh, that's that Saturday,
Right.
that's that Saturday morning.
Okay.
Yes.
8 to 12 or less.
Probably, I will just say I can't be, I would have to get a babysitter because my husband works on Saturday, so 8 to 12, and my son works, so 8 to 12, less would be better.
Okay.
But whatever, I can always,
Maybe 9 to 12 or.
no, I mean, I don't
shorten it.
mind meeting at 8, but if it was 8 to 11 or.
Yeah, 3
whatever,
hours rather than 4.
Rather than 4, it
We'll
would
shoot for
just
that.
be easier
do
to,
that.
I mean, I can just leave, but.
Yep.
So Monday, we're gonna be looking at this again on Monday.
We're going to decide if there's any last thoughts before we
Okay,
vote it.
okay,
So we'll vote it
yeah.
as it is, or if someone has to make some changes, and then we transmit it as we voted it to the Finance Committee
Okay,
for them to do their review.
okay. 'Cause I did find some other small typos, not money related, but,
You can tell Jen directly, and then she can
Yeah, that'd be good.
see if there's anything.
And a question did arise as to a week from tonight, the board's desire to meet in person versus,
I'll do whatever people want to do. What, is the agenda going to consist namely of this? Or is it going
this
to
will be the primary issue, but there'll be other business, yes.
I just think, and I'm just gonna throw it out there, we can leave it as it is, but I just think it's not so much about this, because everybody's, we sort of know people's status because we're friendly, but when we're inviting the public in, I just feel, we should be aware that there are folks that are gonna probably feel really uncomfortable sitting in, when this room is packed, sitting in this room to do business. So I suppose that they will maybe articulate that concern to Diane, and we can deal with it accordingly. I just want to be sensitive to the fact that there are probably folks who will come before this board for regular business, licenses, things like that, that for whom coming into this room when it's full of everybody is a bit of a daunting, experience because of the way the numbers are in particular now. So maybe just, if we can transmit to Diane that message that if people have that concern, I don't know how we would address it, but that we just are trying to be sensitive to.
One other option we have is moving people in and out, which, we have a fair amount of extra room in town hall. They can be down the hallway, we alert them and bring them in.
I guess it just
When it's
depends on
getting
how
near their
packed
time.
we are,
Yeah,
but
yeah.
I just think of some of those nights when we're completely packed.
Oh, yeah,
I just,
definitely.
you know,
I think that's really a concern we should take on ourselves from a public health standpoint. We have to take responsibility for that.
Well, it's also, I think a lot of people would rather have the in-person meetings. I think it's easier to do. We haven't really had too many requests other than one or two ladies that keep telling us everyone in town should be wearing a mask.
Yeah, but we haven't
And
had,
anybody say, can we go back to remote meetings?
we haven't
You
had
guys
the
don't feel-
Omicron variant bearing down on this either.
Yeah.
I just want to raise the issue that I think we need to be sensitive to the fact that if the numbers keep going for the winter in the way that they're going, I'm not saying we have to go back to Zoom, but we should think about how we're going to just do good customer service for members of the public. We live in a place where the demographic is a bit older. People may wish to, participate, and that may be something that is not comfortable. So just putting it on the table. I don't think it needs to do anything.
Have you had any feedback from Scott other than the weekly
Well, I
report?
was just going to mention that Scott, the Board of Health met tonight. Scott texted me to indicate that the Board of Health is recommending that the Select Board consider reestablishing the mandatory mask order for town buildings,
Okay.
period. And of course, we've had that in the past. So that would be something that this board can take up
On the
when you
10th.
so determine. I think.
We could take it up now, really. I mean, it's other business.
Well, it's not on the agenda.
No, it's not, but.
Yeah, so I want to be a little careful of that, because we're not affording people a chance to comment on it if we act on it. And I don't have anything official from the Board of Health, I just have a text.
But we can
I
put
want
it
to
on
be
for the
cautious
10th.
about what they actually voted, and yeah, you can take it up on the 10th.
And maybe
The
he
other
could
thing,
be-
just as an aside, I'll just tell you from the standpoint of Town Hall, that it's a voluntary mask mandate, but I will tell you that town employees, when they're in public areas, are wearing masks.
Yeah.
When they're at their desk, they're not. But when they're in public areas, going to the restroom, going into meetings, and the public by and large is doing the same thing. So, I think people have been very conscientious about masks in this community, at least in town buildings, from my understanding and my experience. So I just share that with you.
Just so you know, even though it's not on our agenda, we've already voted that if the Board of Health issues this directive, that we're gonna support it. All we have to do is announce it if we.
Right, but I don't know exactly what they voted, is what
Okay.
I'm saying.
I got you.
I have a text, and was it on their agenda? I don't know.
Okay.
Right, so we can just,
So we just want to be careful about open meeting and that kind of thing, that we don't.
Well, if you
Step on.
determine that their meeting was held and that they voted it, you can just make an announcement tomorrow, and if you wanna say that they've implemented, as Mr. McGann pointed out, he had the authority to implement that at any time, and we concurred and agreed with that, so.
Yep. I just want to emphasize the last time, both the Board of Health
yeah, I
and the
think it
Select
has to
Board
be on our
voted.
agenda for Monday.
So I think it's helpful, it's
Yeah.
not far off, that you might want to consider that.
Okay.
Great.
But let me
So-
see exactly
so
what
can we
they
have-
did.
Could we ask Scott to maybe come to our meeting on Monday?
Certainly,
And
yeah,
then and have that on the agenda, so we can just talk about
Yeah.
the issues in general and get his feedback.
We had talked
Yeah.
about that regardless, just
Yeah.
because there's so much going on.
There's just so much going on. I think it's just helpful.
I'd like to get a sense of the
Public to hear.
board on their feeling about the Zoom versus in-person. How do you guys feel about it?
For this next meeting?
I have no personal preference. I will go with whatever we feel is most appropriate.
I'm also indifferent, but I would defer to if you guys have a preference.
I don't, I'm okay with, like I said, I'm okay with doing it in person. It's more for the folks that are coming to utilize the services of the
Right.
select board.
I agree.
That's a message that I know Diane and Phyllis and staff at town manager's office can sort out. So I guess, there are plenty of folks for like, a lot of the licenses, it's a little bit pro forma. We look at it, every department says, okay, we don't necessarily need every licensee to be sitting here. I actually think it would be a good policy, we get them in advance. If there has not been a flag by a department, I don't know why we would even have to have those folks come. That's
Except
just,
that we don't know if some board member has a particular concern that might be raised at the meeting, and we're not gonna find that out. That's the
yeah.
only potential glitch.
Oh, wait a minute. I'm not hearing Megan say that we wouldn't listen to that particular,
No, she's saying maybe they don't need to come.
that license. I see.
Most of the things that we do, we don't even ask any questions of them because they are, again, we have department heads who are charged with really checking quarries, checking for fire, whatever it might be. I think we generally know when there's a hot button one, coming down the pike, because we get feedback. So we can talk about it another time, but I just think it goes along with maybe what we're going to talk about on that 15th, ways that we can streamline both for productivity, but also for public health. There are ways we can streamline our meetings where we don't have to have everybody for every single issue in here at the exact same moment. There might be ways we can handle that better. So we can put that over for that meeting on the 15th because it's sort of part of that conversation.
Yeah, okay.
So.
Question about the 15th. So I've had to cancel my vacation and reschedule a not vacation. So I'm going to be leaving Saturday, and I'm wondering if I need to leave a little bit early before the meeting ends. If I am going to be in the car heading to the airport, can I call in to finish the meeting? Is that?
Yeah, I guess so.
You
Okay.
can, but I wouldn't feel pressured to.
I'm going to visit my in-laws and then going to visit my family, so it's not really a vacation anyway.
So you might as well.
You're on camera.
Yeah.
If they're watching this, then hey.
Well, we do have the remote participation policy on July, so
I could.
you can
Okay.
take full advantage of that.
Okay.
They probably can't tell who's talking with the masks.
I know.
Yes, yeah.
So,
The public can do the remote participation as
No.
well by phone?
That is only for the
No.
board.
Thank you.
That is only for the board.
Did you ever find out any more about the possibility of hybrid meetings that we were?
It's something that we're exploring with IT, but again, we don't have an IT director. We're in the midst of a search. In fact, the interviews are starting this week, so it's, it's just a capacity issue.
I was thinking that I know that our system is television-based, but we have fiber to the building, so we have internet fiber, right, in the building?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we
It's
do.
not tied to the TV system, is that the issue?
We can get internet on the
Yeah,
TV.
yeah.
Oh. Well, maybe we're not too far from being able to do it. That
This
would be
building's-
nice if we could, because that would eliminate the whole problem with the participation with the public.
why can't we allow, can we just go back for 1 second? Can we explore the ability to allow the public, not for public comment, but say for a licensee, something simple? The policy doesn't allow for that.
Yeah, I can speak that. So
I mean,
currently under the emergency legislation, we do have the legal ability to have a hybrid meeting, but what the law change, one of the most recent, hopefully last phase of emergency legislation, it actually took away some options in the sense that what they said is if there's going to be remote participation outside of board members under the old remote participation meeting for board members policy, if you're going to open it up to a consultant, if you're going to open it up to a staff member, who's at home, then anyone from the public who wants to participate in that exact same way has to be given that exact same opportunity.
Well, that's what we're
So we
talking about.
can't pick, just licensees and not Joe Q public. It's sort of all or nothing. So the law does allow hybrid, but that's the technical challenge. And it is possible to do it, but for a meeting of our sort of size and scope, it's
You'd
going
have
to
to have
take some
someone
technical.
designated, you
Yeah,
need a designated person to run that component.
You do need a
There's
designated
both
IT.
some technology that we need to purchase, some training, and we're going to need some live support, I believe,
Yep.
to make that work smoothly.
Thank you.
It'd be nice to know if we could get that. Anything else? We got a motion to adjourn. Is there a second?
Second.
Anybody, all those in favor?
Aye. Don't ask anybody.
Anybody in favor?
Thank you. and happy